the way it goes at our house. Always the rush for the morning mail. The children look for comic books and premiums. My wife, who keeps hoping for a red letter day, well, she usually winds up with the morning paper. But on this particular day, the mail was important, especially for me. Dear Mr. Zachary, we appreciate your interest in our turkey raising program and most cordially invite you to visit Larro Research Farm at your earliest opportunity. For months, I'd been reading about turkeys, writing for information and looking at land, and dreaming of the time when I'd own my own flock. Now I could visit the farm where poultry scientists carry on extensive experimental work in turkey nutrition. The trip meant a great deal to me. I knew if I were to be a successful turkey raiser, I must know something of markets, weather conditions, and disease. But most of all, I knew I must thoroughly understand the fundamentals. I must learn how to achieve maximum production and efficiency. And I knew I'd find the answers here. I wasn't disappointed. My guide proved a congenial host.
I enjoyed showing him around. Here at Larro Research Farm, we make a regular practice of taking visitors on tour. Usually, we begin by telling our guests something about the farm itself. We have a staff of highly trained scientists and technicians who put all our turkeys on test to check and verify new improvements in heredity, feeding, housing, sanitation, management, and marketing. Ever since 1929, our research men have raised breeders, hatched thousands of poults, and tested over 700 feed formulas. We keep careful records of the nutrients and ingredients in all of the various feed tests. We try out new feeding methods, and we study the effect of both on the fowl themselves. Our goal is to develop feeds which grow birds with more meat, with finer flavor and better finish. Feeds which return to the turkey grower the maximum profit over his feed costs. Since success in turkey raising depends a great deal on heredity, we begin our work with the breeding flocks of young turkeys. We recommend using 1 tom for every 10 to 15 hens. Pullets lay more eggs than yearling hens and are more profitable because hatchability tends to decline with increasing age, and young toms are at their best during the first breeding season. They're lighter in weight, more vigorous, and less likely to injure the hens during mating. As a good management practice to ensure good fertility, our scientists suggest mating the flock at least a month before the hens start to lay. This community-type nest is often used in small nesting houses. It's built without partitions to prevent the hens from piling up. A sufficiently matured flock normally starts to lay about 4 weeks after being put under lights. During the breeding season, lights are turned on both morning and evening to provide about 16 hours of light and stimulate reproduction. At this time of year, the hatches are all pulled, but as my visitor was interested in the care of the young poults, I told him about the Larro sanitation, management, and feeding practices in the brooder house. We always don clean rubbers and coveralls before going into the brooder pens. We recommend changing clothing to prevent the spread of disease from adult birds to the young poults. Proper sanitation is the best method of controlling disease. And since proper sanitation means clean poults in a clean house, the pens and equipment must be thoroughly sterilized at the start. The interior should be doused with scalding water, and the floors and walls scrubbed at least 4 feet up from the floor. Steaming the cleaned walls and equipment will then kill even such disease organisms as coccidia if all areas are thoroughly covered. The final scrubbing is done with a solution of 1 can of concentrated lye to 15 gallons of water. To raise poults successfully, every turkey grower must have a well-constructed building, clean, dry litter, plenty of clean, wholesome feed and water in clean containers, sufficient fresh air without drafts, maximum sunlight, and adequate facilities for regulating heat. The next step, of course, is to obtain good poults. Generally speaking, a good poult is one that's well-bred, well-hatched, and free from disease. It has the ability to live, to be healthy, to grow rapidly, to use feed efficiently, and to feather out well, all inherited characteristics. We at Larro suggest culling all weak or poor poults. They have little chance of developing profitably and may endanger the health of others. The better a poult is cared for, the better it is fed, the more profitable will be the results. It's good management to use a poult guard around the brooder. The guard should be placed about 18 inches from the edge of the hover. The distance of the guard from the hover is increased as the poults grow. After 6 or 7 days, the guard covers the entire floor, cutting off only the corners to prevent poults from piling up. It's especially important to watch them as they settle down for the night. By using a dim light and by maintaining the proper temperature, the habit of crowding and piling can be reduced and controlled. We've found that turkey poults should not be brooded in units of more than 250. Crowding more into a pen tends to retard normal development, to increase the death rate, and to usher in disease. After the first 2 weeks, we provide wire platforms for the hoppers, both as a sanitary measure and to keep litter out of the feed. When the poults are 10 days to 2 weeks old, we change to the intermediate size hoppers with 20 running feet of hopper space for every 100 poults. At the same time, the jar waterers are moved away from the hover to introduce the poults to the larger automatic equipment. Water is an important part of the ration, and a skimpy supply will reduce the efficiency of the best feeds or feeding methods. Our Larro turkey specialists define a good feeding plan as one that supplies all the nutrients needed to develop good market turkeys and to do the job economically. The Larro turkey raising plan calls for Larro turkey builder during the first 14 weeks when the growth rate is tremendous. Larro chick grain and grit are added on the 15th day. In spite of the success of Larro farm-tested feeds, our scientists still seek to find a better way. We continually test new formulas, new ingredients, and new methods in the hope that we can bring about still further improvements in our feeds and feeding plans. All of our formula test feeds are carefully weighed and recorded. For turkey flocks of the same breed on the same feed and feeding program will differ as to the amount of feed they consume. After the turkeys are 2 weeks old, the proportion fed is roughly 2 sacks of mash to 1 of chick grains. In making these feeding tests, we check and double check. We spare no effort to make certain that the Larro formulas we develop provide the best feed available to grow good market turkeys and to grow them economically. Careful testing of the various feed formulas includes a weekly weighing of the birds. At times, we weigh them in groups using a weighing crate. In other tests, we weigh them individually. Feeding efficiency is measured by the pounds of feed required to make 1 pound of gain. These experiments have proven that greens are not necessary when using Larro and the Larro feeding method. Developing the proper feeding habits curbs the tendency of poults to consume appreciable amounts of litter. Some of the good litter materials are sugarcane pith, straw, peat moss, pulverized sterilized corn cobs, and peanut hulls. When the young turkeys are 14 weeks old, we transfer them from the brooder to the growing house, where we keep them until market age for more accurate research testing. After they arrive in the growing house, the upper beaks are tipped to prevent cannibalism. Tipping or debeaking with an electrically heated knife sears rather than cuts off the top of the upper beak. Usually, one operation will eliminate cannibalism for most, if not all, of the growing period. Only the toms to be used as breeders should not be debeaked by this method.
My guide suggested that I would find a good deal of additional information in the Larro turkey book. He mentioned roosts and roosting space, discussed marketing, talked briefly about hospitalizing sick or injured birds, and told me how growing turkeys are raised on range. He described several range operations, beginning with a large turkey farm in Iowa.
As you probably know, in severe weather, a good turkey raiser will set his shelters on the brow of a hill to break strong winds. The shelters are built with open ends to permit joining them into one long building. Feeders and waterers are then placed on the protected slopes, for the fowl seek the sheltered areas. In wet weather, the range around the shelters should be bedded down with hay to provide a clean, dry area near the roosts. Cold, wet ground frequently causes chilling and disease. As an added precaution, ravines and waterways are all fenced out of range. Turkeys are apt to drift into a gully or water trap during a heavy rain or snowstorm and pile up. One of the best methods of controlling disease on range is to provide an adequate water supply, free of surface water, contamination, or pollution. The drinking area of a good fountain should be sufficiently wide and deep to permit the turkeys to drink conveniently. In warm weather, it's advisable to provide one waterer for every 100 birds. Every effort should be made to stimulate heavy feed consumption, because the birds which eat the most are likely to make the best and most economical weight gains. In range feeding, Larro turkey finisher and Larro breeder mash are fed in pellet form to prevent blowing of the feed. Pellets are provided during the day to give the birds an adequate supply of protein, and grains are added only in the evening. In the warmer climate of California, range problems are somewhat different. Shade shelters are set on the side of the hill to protect the flocks from high winds and to allow water to drain off quickly. These shelters are open on all sides for maximum ventilation. Heat is a major problem, and boards and camouflage nets are stretched over wooden horses to keep the flocks cool. Many turkey growers combat the heat by using cottonseed burrs or hulls on the ground. The litter is estimated to be 12% cooler than sand. In this part of the country, sandy soil frequently permits longer and more intense use of the land. The sand quickly absorbs moisture and droppings, and less acreage is required per 100 birds than for flocks of similar size in the Middle West. Some fenced-in areas are equipped with metal troughs which carry a continuous supply of running water over great distances. The fences frequently serve to divide toms and hens into two flocks. By growing them on separate ranges, both are able to make more rapid gains in weight. In Minnesota, flocks of hens and toms are separated by rows of corn planted between ranges. The corn obstructs the view of the birds and is one of the most satisfactory ways in which to discourage flying and prevent mixing of the flocks. Planting the open fields with alfalfa, oats, and other forage crops helps to supplement the feed and reduce the danger of picking. These ranges are alternated every 10 days to 2 weeks to avoid a concentration of manure and disease germs. And the land should be reused only after the second year. Naturally, when you raise turkeys, you run plenty of risks, but the risks are worth it. At 26 weeks, market age, the average weight expectancy for Larro-fed broad-breasted hens is 15 to 17 pounds, and for toms, 24 to 28 pounds. And often they exceed those weights. The male-female total feed consumption for the broad-breasted bronze raised in confinement or on very poor range is 90 pounds per bird, 23 pounds of Larro turkey builder, 23 pounds of Larro turkey finisher, and 44 pounds of grain. If these turkeys are raised on good range, they'll make equally fine weights and do it on 5 to 15% less total feed. Average strains of turkeys will consume about 73 pounds of total feed per bird in 26 weeks, 18 pounds of Larro turkey builder, 21 pounds of Larro turkey finisher, and 34 pounds of grain. The expected weight range for the toms is 18 to 22 pounds, for the hens, 12 to 14 pounds. These rapid weight gains and high efficiency of growth illustrate the difference between ordinary and very profitable operations. Our Larro farm-tested turkey feeds are the result of years of research and a wealth of scientific knowledge. They have all been devised at the farm and proved under test to grow good market turkeys, to grow them economically, and to return to the turkey raiser the greatest profit over his feed cost.
And that was it. I learned the fundamentals. Stock good poults, use only clean sanitary buildings, equipment, and range, select the best feeds and feeding methods. And for me, it's Larro with top profit over feed costs.